This is GMG Plus. Nelson Mandela said education is a powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. Well, my next guest took that really seriously and moved from nowhere to the world's best university. According to a December 2018 article on myjoyonline.com, the headline was, "From Adidome to Harvard, a young man's rise from obscurity to the world's best university." Very, very happy to have the gentleman in my studio right now. Please welcome to our show, Maclean Sarbah. Good morning, Maclean.
Good morning.
Good to see you, Mac.
Thank you very much. Thanks
You look very well. You look healthy.
Trying to be like you. I'm in good company.
Interesting. An interesting headline I just read also, from Adidome to Harvard, the world's best university. Quite a story you have. Let's start from the beginning. You were born in the Volta region.
Right.
And so how did you end up going to school in Adidome, in the Volta region?
Right. I mean, it's been a long and circuitous journey. I would say the bulk of it's been by the grace of God, some hard work and a shift, and a few lucky strikes here and there. But more importantly, I think at the core of my story is just sheer resilience and sort of an insistence on having a vision for where I wanted to go, sticking with that even in the midst of difficulty and adversity, as you can see along the journey. So without a scintilla of doubt, God has played, I would say, a central role, and I need to push with hard work and dedication. And also, the main hero is my father, who passed away in 2016.
We'll talk about your father, but your family consisted of 7 other siblings, plus you making 8. You grew up. What were those really difficult times for your family?
Yeah, I would say that, my family predominantly is from the northern region of the Volta region, and the bulk of them had actually migrated to Yeji after the construction of the dam in 1965, which actually led to, I would say, a massive change in the ecosystem of the river. And if you're familiar with the historiography, my folks are very excessively fishermen, so they sort of travel along the Volta Lake to places like Yeji, Abotoase, and many other places. So my father had migrated there to live with his uncle long before I was born. So at the time that I was born in the 80s, Yeji, I would say that was more sort of a centerpiece of like fishing and all of that. And I would say that there were so many other things that actually revolve around the lake. My folks being excessively fishermen, and you have more the Ashantis who were businessmen who bought the fish and sold it in Kumasi. And then you have the Northerners who were mostly yam farmers and all of that. So I think we had moments of great joy and a bit of the luxury of that moment within the confines of that place. And later on, by some quirk of fate, things happened which sort of set our life on a different trajectory. But even in the midst of that, we didn't lose hope. We clung very tightly to sort of that, I would say, the mythology of wanting to get to a destination that pretty much superseded the humble beginnings.
Where you came from, absolutely. A part of the story said that your family grew up in a small house the size of a shop. Is that true?
Right. So, the story was carried by a journalist. I think she's predominantly American. So this house is a fairly standard, very small house in Yeji. And so because the Tongus are very family-oriented, and the bulk of them actually lived across the river. So on Sundays, many of them would visit to come and sell the produce and their fish in the market. So you'd have a lot of people with beds all over the place, in addition to us siblings and our parents that were living in the house. So in those moments, you enjoy the company of many of these people, and some of them were uncles who drummed home the importance of working hard. So those things were all, I would say, provided a sort of fodder or sort of a fertile ground for you to see sort of the simplicity of life and the importance of that, drawing inspiration from that and using that sort of as a conduit to propel you to the upper echelons of whatever field you want.
You were a smart kid in school. So why did you end up at Adidome Day School? I bet you were accepted by some other schools in the country that are seen to be, more A-list and more better for your future potential.
Yeah, without a scintilla of doubt. I mean, toward my graduation so I did my first 9 years of school in Yeji, and toward my graduation, my father suffered a stroke, so he was away for the most part. And so when the results came, I was accepted at Bishop Herman College, which I didn't get to go. And so I started off at Yeji Secondary School for a little bit, and I didn't like the school. I just felt like, as a young man, there was a degree of melancholy. I wanted to go to some of the best institutions,
a better school,
so that I could also have the bragging rights, you know. But I didn't have that, so I didn't take education very seriously at Yeji Secondary School. But in the second year, my father, I still do, an aunt in Adidome, so I was moved over there to continue at Adidome Secondary School.
By the way, so just for the record, would have loved to have you at Bishop Herman College.
I could be an associate.
Would have been really happy to have you there. Right. Now that you've been to Harvard, let's talk about your father for a moment. Now, you say he was a disciplinarian. Right. What were his contributions to your education?
Oh, I think my father played the central role. And I think, as you just said, my rise in many ways sort of shrouded in the disciplinary nature of my father. In the evenings, I remember he would sit in front of the house in his armchair, and we were supposed to be studying from like 6 p.m. to about 10 or 11.
This was a must.
Right.
You must do it.
It was a must, yes. And I remember even in secondary school, whenever I came back when school was on recess and I came back to visit him, he had moved to Mepe at some point. I would sit there and read, and then I think around 4:30, 4 a.m. 5 a.m. in the morning, he would wake me up again, and I would just continue. So my father was drumming home the importance of working hard. He was a man who believed in the power of education, the power of hard work, and also the power of determination. And he had a brother who supposedly was supposed to travel overseas, but unfortunately lost his life. And so for some reason, there was a vacuum in his life that he felt that someone needed to occupy. And so me and my siblings, we felt the brunt of that. But now that I sit here, I have my father to thank for the journey that I've had.
You really made him proud also.
Without a doubt.
You really made him proud. So back in Northtown, you became the best student in the district, and you became one of the few to pass the secondary school examinations, and even one of the first to go to the University of Ghana. How did this feel for you at the time? I mean, country boy who is now going to move to Accra to the country's premier university.
Oh no, I mean, I think all along that had been the dream, to climb to heights that not many people would have given us a chance for. And so for me, it was a great moment. I was excessively happy to emerge out of that place. Just for the record, other people also did go to other institutions, and I think I want to drum home the importance of all of us emerging out of that place that not many people would have thought possible, and given the circumstances in which we were, because Adidome Secondary School at the time is in contradistinction to the Adidome Secondary School of today, with the boarding house and with students from all over the country. But during our time, classes were actually in abandoned warehouses that were built by the Russians after independence. We didn't have enough teachers, we didn't have enough books, just a library that barely qualified as a library. But I think with hard work, the sheer grace of God, we were able to come out of that place. So for me, it was sort of an inflection point to emerge out of that place and to go to Legon, which was like a completely different worm.
Interesting. What were your siblings at the time? Were they all getting the same type of education?
So I'm number 4 from up. So
you're number 4.
Yeah. So my brother had been a leader all along. So I had younger siblings who were in JSS or primary school, and they also looked up to me. So some way I also kind of felt that there was a degree of pressure to make sure that I lived up to the billing, and to make sure that a lot of these others followed me. But more importantly, there was the mythology surrounding my uncle who died prior to his leaving for overseas to study. And I think I had been born on the same day, so there was the belief that I was reincarnated. Yeah. And so that pressure was sort of on me to make sure that at the end of the day,
that's good reincarnation too. If you ask me. Right. Interesting stuff. Right. So in case you just joined us, this is GMG Plus. We are speaking to Maclean Sarbah, a young man who made it from Adidome in the Volta Region to the world's best university, Harvard. But before that, you were in the University of Ghana and graduated with a first class. Right. You're a sharp guy.
Just the grace of God.
You always wanted to achieve academic excellence because you felt like you were reincarnated and you were born on the day that your uncle was supposed to, you know, your uncle who was supposed to leave for the West to continue his education.
Right.
How did this first class feel when you were in University of Ghana?
You know,
first class honors.
To tie that into your question about whether I had always been interested in education, I think when we were growing up in Year G, I had always had a penchant for the academics and sort of the knowledge about the world. I remember oftentimes you'd have the Daily Graphic, and there was a man who lived very close to my father's house, and he would buy that. So oftentimes people would go over there to read it, and most of them were older people. I would have to wait sometimes for as long as 3 hours to be able to get my hands on it.
On the papers?
On the papers. But one of the things I actually realized, which actually propelled me to acquire more knowledge, was that I became sort of the conduit through which people sought information. So when people didn't know anything about the world, they would say, go to Maclean Sarbah. And I was so young, but it gave me a kind of power. And so I saw that knowledge was very powerful.
So you had to keep going.
Right.
That's good motivation.
Right.
But even before you came out with first class honors, school wasn't easy. It was quite tough. The articles say that sometimes you didn't even have money to buy food.
Right. Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. But one of the things I think I've always been, my father had this mantra written on his wall, which said, future is unknown. So even though, you know, the means were meager and they weren't excessively lavish, there was always a belief in a better tomorrow. And so I just felt like if I did my part and just gave it my all, exerted the best of my energies, some way, somehow, something else could get in the mix, and over the long pool, I could emerge and find myself somewhere, which actually happened. So when I graduated from Legon, actually when I arrived in Legon, it was like one of my very few days in Accra. And I remember when I went to
you had never been to Accra before this?
I had passed through, you know, when you travel from Yeji to the Volta region, you pass through Achimota. So when you see the lights, you're excessively carried away by the sheer grandeur.
This was the only time you were in Accra.
Right.
That's quite fascinating. Right. Now let's start a story from the West where you got admitted into Columbia. How did you get into Columbia University?
Right. But before that, I wanted to touch on the Legon bit of it. You talked about the first class component of it. So I arrived, and remember some of them were calling me one-man union. One-man union. Right.
What was that name for?
Because I was one of the few from Adidome Secondary School to the University of Ghana.
And to have a first class.
Right.
First class honors. Wow, impressive.
You know, it's the grace of God. I mean, when you we had to have that, because at the end of the day, when you don't have a lot of things, you don't have a lot of wealth, you don't involve yourself in so many of the sort of the distractions, and so at the end of, if you don't emerge with a first class, then
but you were what did you get satisfaction from obtaining first class honors? Did you feel like, oh yes, I have arrived now, I'm okay?
I got the satisfaction in my second year. Actually, I remember some of my classmates at the time. Legon usually had names of the students who were performing in the top 10% on a notice board. Some of my roommates had actually gone and seen that my name was on there as for academic excellence. And so they came back, and some of them were like, Adidome, hey, Agbalapa, they take more like that. You know?
Adidome is a top student. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, from Legon to Columbia.
Right.
Tell me about this transition.
Right. Yeah.
From Africa to the West.
Right. So that happened by virtue of me winning the diversity immigration visa, which is a green card, which pretty much entitles you to an everlasting stay in the United States of America. So I arrived over there, and as a young man who grew up here in Ghana, the weather, you know, it was excessively cold. It wasn't an easy transition, but I still clung to that hope. I just believe that, you know, if I can scale all the hurdles and all the difficulties and all the obstacles in Ghana, I was, you know, in the United States, which pretty much provided a bit more opportunity at the time. So even though I began from the bottom, I clung to hope. I believe that if I give it my all, work really hard, something could change as well. So
did you find other excessively brilliant students in your class? Did you, at the point, did you feel like, oh, okay, I'm here now with a first class honors, but there are other people who are way sharper and I need to work harder at this point?
In the United States?
In Colombia?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I think the educational systems are different, and they were born and bred there. So they have a grasp of things that we don't. Some of them technological, without a scintilla of doubt. So some things I actually had to learn. And I remember we had a class, and we were supposed to do an analysis of Snow White. And if you grew up in Yeji, you didn't have access to TV.
Snow White.
So, you know, we didn't grow up on Disney movies.
Yeah.
So I remember we had a group work, and then I asked, what is Snow White?
Oh.
And the lady looked at me, and he was like, are you stupid? Like, literally, you don't know what Snow White is?
Yeah.
And then I was like, look, not everyone actually grew up in Disney movies. You know? Some of us were even worried about feeding as opposed to like watching TV. So, you know, some things I had to get up to speed on, but there were things that I think you learn from Legon which also give you a slight upper hand. One of the things that, because you spend so much time memorizing a lot of things like in sociology, political science, and all of that, you keep those in your memory for far too long, whereas in the American system, there's more of an insistence on the practicality and the application of it. So I noticed that most of the things that I had learned from Legon came in handy. What I needed to do, however,
to practicalize.
Right.
Interesting.
Right.
From Columbia to Cambridge, another great school.
Right.
I mean, you're like going to some of the best schools in the world at this point. What pushed you to Cambridge at this point?
No, I remember when I was growing up, I heard Oxford and Cambridge on radio, and sort of the sheer grandeur of it. I just had a feeling that I wanted to go there.
Just because of the name.
And also, I always want to push myself. I set big goals that go beyond my imagination, go beyond what my means as an individual. That's what I've always been. You know, like you talk about Harvard and Columbia and Cambridge, but for me, it's gone. What is next?
Now what's next?
Right. So yeah, so I transitioned from Columbia to Cambridge because I'd always wanted to go there, and I also wanted to kind of diversify. I like an eclectic approach, being able to, you know, decode issues from so many different standpoints. And so at the Judge Business School at Cambridge, I did an MPhil in innovation strategy and organization, which was slightly different than what I did at Columbia. So I wanted to be able to draw from sort of the multidisciplinarity of fields in my analysis of issues.
And then to Harvard,
right,
an Ivy League school in Boston, Massachusetts, regarded as the world's best university by most people. You got in there. Now this is Columbia, Cambridge, and now Harvard.
Right.
At this point in your educational career, what were you looking for that you hadn't achieved yet?
No, I actually hadn't planned on going to Harvard.
Okay.
You know, now that I look at it, maybe God just meant it for good. When I returned from Cambridge, I was working in banking with Citibank, North America, and they discontinued operations in the city in which I worked, which was Boston. Okay. And so I took a severance, and then at the same time, my sister had a baby, so I went to perform my uncle duties. So I was babysitting for about 4 months, and then just when I was about to get back in the job market to look for a job, my father passed away in Ghana. So a week before I left for Ghana, I happened to be in the Boston area, and I noticed they had an open house. So I walked in there just curious to find out what's going on in there. And so there were students from all over the world.
Trying to get into Harvard.
Right. They actually, some of them were very intent on doing that. I, on the other hand, was just curious.
You were just curious about it.
Right. And so I went to the open house, and the professors actually found out that I had previous degrees, and I spoke about what I wanted to do, about my interest in my community, my interest in playing a role in contributing to many of the challenges that Ghana and the African continent and even the world faces. And so they encouraged me to apply. And so when I came to Ghana, my father was buried. I went back to Boston and submitted my applications, running around like a headless chicken, trying to put all the pieces together. But God being so good, things turned out quite well.
You became a Harvard grad.
Right.
Now, after all this education, you're interested in curbing youth unemployment, especially here in Ghana. Tell me why this subject connects to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested at a macro level in playing a role in solving many of the issues that, you know, not only my community but our country and our continent faces, and youth unemployment is just a segment of that. When I was at Harvard, the bulk of my classes were tailored to youth unemployment because it's something that I began to take a particular interest in, partly because of my background as an individual, having that degree of, I would say, synergy with many of the people who go through that. But I think it came to a boil mostly in 2017 when I returned to Ghana, 16 actually, to bury my father. After my father was buried, I had the unique opportunity to get together with many of my friends, some of them doing excessively well, others suffering one difficulty or another. difficulties that have become the norm for many young people in the country. And so some of them I noticed didn't have jobs, you know, and that was the predominant issue. And so when I went back, I sort of did that thorough introspection, think very deeply about what I wanted to do, because you know, many of the issues in Ghana are broad, and you could only contribute to a particular component if you were focused on it. So I felt that youth unemployment tied mostly into my background as an individual, and also sort of my penchant and my proclivity for education. And so I wanted to leverage what I studied not only at Harvard but many of the countries that I had been to, particularly about innovation and entrepreneurship, to see the degree to which collectively all of us could play a role. And so for me, it's not so much about coming here with a chip on your shoulder, but it's more about wanting to work with people, because I do believe that the problems are here, and there are people who've been on the ground for very long. They've been doing work, and I think it's important to not to discredit those people, to respect them, to give them credit for what they've been doing, but more importantly, collectively, because I think it's very easy for all of us to begin to act sort of like an archipelago, in the sense that everyone is an island working on their own. I just feel that if we came together, create a critical mass of people who are playing their roles, then all of us collectively can make a dent.
Interesting word, archipelago.
Right.
We say archipelago. But you're setting up a foundation in honor of your father, called the Sarbah Foundation, and this will mainly be responsible for tackling this youth employment issues and other social issues as well. And you've been in connection with, you've been in touch with Adidome community, where your journey started. Tell me what you want to achieve mainly. What's your focus with this Sarbah Foundation?
I think at a broader level, the Sarbah Foundation is about wanting to play a key role in sort of solving accessibility, relevance, and quality education issues, be that at secondary or even tertiary level. But more importantly, a component of that would be toward youth unemployment, which basically is the result of sort of the quality and the relevance component of our education. So I'm looking fundamentally within the youth unemployment component to set up a kind of fellowship with which we would be trying to equip young people in tertiary or even secondary institutions to get not only the knowledge but also the mentorship and sort of the financial muscle to be able to take their ideas to market. But one thing that we also need to recognize is that not everyone has that natural affinity for entrepreneurship. So even if they don't end up becoming entrepreneurs, they would have learned skills like communication, teamwork, leadership, all of those that are, I think, are very, very leverageable within the job market.
Interesting stuff. It's lovely talking to you, Maclean. We hope that everything you set out to achieve back home here in Ghana is a success, and you're an inspiration to many people, from Adidome to Harvard. A boy's story from obscurity to the world's best university. Interesting read too.
It's the grace of God.
We hope you continue to use your experience to impact knowledge here in your home country and all over the world also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maclean.
God bless you. God bless you.